Okay, folks, the last little segment we're going to talk about today is about finishing up your project and thinking a little bit about surface texture. Now, again, this is going to be a totally physical project, so I don't want you to draw or paint onto this sculpture. I want you to do everything as a physical layer. And so let's look a little bit, just have a quick couple examples, but different ways of thinking about surface texture. So let's look above. All right. Oh, just quickly, I did glue this thing together, and here you can see it all lined up pretty well. I cut off the extra little glue on there, and I've got this nice curvilinear box-like shape. And the inside, you can see those triangular tabs all working together to glue that nice curve over the top. Okay, so really anything goes with this project in terms of how you use paper, right? So any way that you can utilize it, you can even tear it because that edge is going to mean something different for a texture, right? Now, texture can be built up by layers. So this, if I started to layer more and more of these things together, I could start to give that illusion of texture across the surface, right? So some sort of illusion of that form. Even the littlest bit of layer is going to catch light and shadow and give you a little bit of that dimension that you may be able to achieve, right? So if I were to layer these on top of this, they would certainly stand out. Again, it's going to be subtle. A thicker piece of paper like a cardstock or the Bristol paper is going to be more apparent as it stands across the surface. But if this were, a heel of a shoe and I wanted to add the bottom textures of it, I wouldn't necessarily need to make it that full geometry. Maybe I just repeat these different forms that look like treads across the surface of it. So that can be a way of thinking about adding texture. Pattern, repetition, layering can give you intricate, detailed forms. The other thing is folding. So folding, scoring, pleating, anything like this that can give you some sort of different type of texture. If we were to, even do something like this and then cut into it, we could imagine even seeing the reversal of that back and forth and how that might interact. One folded one way, one folded the other way, or folded over the top of one another and then making more textural sort of surface. You can create organic surfaces by, simply rumpling things up. So even though we're thinking about geometry, this does have a structure to it, and it may relate to tree bark or to a rock or to a leaf or anything organic that you may be thinking about. As we open this back up as well, this starts to have a pattern and a texture. Maybe this looks like suede or leather or something that could be really utilized in a more organic form that you're working with. So don't be afraid to really experiment with different ways of making marks onto the surface of the page. If you have the thicker paper, you can actually, start to work into it a little bit. I was showing this tool before, which can allow you to almost draw onto the surface. If I show this in the light, maybe you can see, there you can see a little bit, right? This has a little bit of that surface coming through. So even that little bit of scratching into the surface can be something that can reveal something really great. Additionally, if we start to make cuts, those cuts can form something as well. So if I take these and start to poke them up, now suddenly this has a bit of texture to it as well, right? So breaking the surface, scoring the surface, doing different things to add a little bit more contrast can give you some great ways. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the best lighting here. Give you some great ways of creating that sort of texture and form. And then finally, if you are doing mechanical things that have logos and type and things like that, feel free to print something out. Cut out, layer it on top of one another and cut it out. So for example, if, let's just do this quickly. Okay, there's a a letter form, a letter J, right? If I had this was printed out, I could stack it on top of something, right? I could cut using my X-Acto knife through this right over the top of something, okay? Your printer can be your friend, but again, we don't want printed surfaces for our sculpture. We want to be able to use the forms and shapes accordingly. So that cut out of that drawing, but then underneath, I have the clean piece of paper, which I can pull this shape out of as well. And again, even with that little bit of difference from one layer to the next, we do see the difference in that sort of surface. So play with surface texture, patterning, tearing, anything that you can do, ripping, folding, anything that you can do to sort of mimic the surface texture in your design, and that can really help your overall sculptural form. So just to wrap up, the project is creating a paper sculpture using only the color of the paper, not adding drawing or painting. We are either taking something small, okay, and enlarging it twice the size, okay, or we're taking something humongous or larger than the paper, right? So maybe this stool, for example, okay, and scaling it down smaller, right? So what you end up with is some sort of sculpture that's roughly in this round 12 by 12 in some sort of configuration that way. All right, I'm looking for a good representation of form. I'm looking for good structure. I'm looking for attention to detail. And finally, how are you using the paper and patterning and texture to really make it look like the material that it's originally made from? All right, so that's all for the project. If you have questions, email me. Everyone is doing an individual thing, so that's why I didn't do an overview tutorial, because everyone's going to have different techniques. Feel free to experiment. Great job with the research. Look at those research images as well, excuse me, and think about how those artists use structure, texture, negative space, cutting techniques, assembly techniques to really configure their projects as well. All right, good luck. I look forward to seeing your projects.